One, two. Two.
So maybe we could just get started in the interest of time with the session we have in this room. So let me just clarify that the session here is on domain name registrants' rights and responsibilities. Hopefully we'll get, the rest of participants will join us as we proceed. Before we move on, if I could just confirm with my online participants if they can hear us. If you could just type something on the chat room to confirm that audio is okay from your end. Barak, Brian, all good? Yes, great. So I think in the interest of time, we shall get started as we welcome, additional participants as they come in. My name is Bobo Cheng. I work with the Global Stakeholder Engagement team at ICANN, and I will be moderating this session. And to help me cover this topic today is an eminent panel of, I should say, veterans in this business. But also really very passionate people in the domain name industry. I will be asking them to introduce themselves before they speak. I have colleagues from ICANN joining remotely. I have a colleague from the Africa Telecommunication, the Africa AFTLD, which is the Association of Africa CCTLDs. But we also have our very own Lucky, who is lucky to be here just on time. I just walked in. But most importantly, friends and colleagues who have been, with the community for a while. And it's a pleasure to have them with us today. I think for those of us who don't know Tijani, if you can just wave, he's an elder in the room. We have to recognize him. Okay. So I really hope we'll have an enlightening session for those of us in this room. And to start us off, I want to invite Brian Guterman from ICANN to give us an opening presentation on the topic at hand, which is domain name registrants' rights and responsibilities from an ICANN perspective. So Brian, if you can hear me, over to you.
Hello, I hope you can all hear me okay. Bob, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Thank you. And can you see my screen? I'm sharing a presentation. Is that working?
Sound, Brian, from your side is not very loud.
Okay. Is that better?
Not yet.
No.
But probably just get started. Maybe it is on our side. So as we get it sorted out.
Okay. I'll try and speak loudly, and I hope you can see the presentation on the screen in the room. Do you see a presentation? A slideshow? Yes, can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay, I'll get going then. I hope you can all hear me. And my name is Brian Gutterman. I work for ICANN.org, and part of my responsibilities with ICANN is working on the domain name registrant program. And I'm here to talk about, from the ICANN perspective, domain name registrant rights and responsibilities, and part of that is some best practices for domain name holders, for registrants, when they are thinking about and going ahead and registering domain names. So I'll just give a quick introduction here. So when we talk about registrant rights and responsibilities from an ICANN perspective, we think about the ICANN bylaws. So in the commitments and core values of the ICANN bylaws, which some of you may be aware of, but the bylaws are sort of what guides ICANN as an organization. It says clearly that we are part of our mission and core values is to ensure an open, transparent, and bottom-up multi-stakeholder policy development process that includes everyone, civil society, and end users alike, and within that group, includes domain name holders themselves. So registrants who are registering domain names and getting content up on the DNS, and this works to ascertain the global public interest. Registrant rights and responsibilities are also written into the Registrar Accreditation Agreement, which is the agreement between registrars and ICANN, and rights for domain name holders who are entering into contracts and registration agreements with the registrars include access to information from their registrar regarding processes for registering, managing, transferring, renewing, and restoring domain name registration. So I'm going to be interested to hear from the rest of the esteemed panel about the way they think about registrant rights and responsibilities. But for ICANN, it's part of the bylaws and it's written into their RAA. So it's extremely important. And we at ICANN, and I think the community as a whole, we've always recognized and known that domain name holders who are registrants who are registering domain names, and that could be some of you in the audience, participants on the ground there. I'm sure many of you do have domain names. So these are the individuals and entities that register and manage and maintain domain names that make up the DNS. They're essential to a robust, stable, and secure DNS and marketplace. So along with all of the other actors in the ecosystem, domain name registrants themselves are incredibly important and integral. Here's a few of the policies actually that we can see the community developed policies. Again, if you are involved in the ICANN world, you may have known or have seen work on some of these policies that you see here. The who is data reminder policy, the expired registration recovery policy, the transfer policy, and others. Many of these policies are written to guide what domain name holders, what registrants can and cannot do. Again, to refresh, the domain name holders register domain names from registrars or resellers and obtain web hosting services from web hosting companies and others to get their domain name up and running and active. I'm going to pause here. Can you, the group, hear me okay? Are you good there, Bob? I can see you. Yeah, okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up, so thank you. I'll keep going then. Thank you, Kodishang. Registering domain name. How do I register? Again, this is a refresher for some of you who may already have a domain name, but you register through many different registrars, small or big, and they will ask you to provide some contact information, and then you set the terms in this contract, which your registration will be accepted and maintained. You can register international domain names, probably a topic that is being discussed there on the ground a lot. Couple refreshers, and again, now I'm getting into some best practices when registering domain names that we like to mention. The domain name is different from the website or the URL. The domain name is like the street address for getting postal mail. There must still be a building or post office box at the street address for delivering the letters or packages. That's a metaphor we like to use. So registering and paying a registrar to register a domain name is not the same as owning it or buying it. Again, that's important to remember. Some tips quickly, and then I think we should go out to the rest of the panelists, and I can answer questions later. But when you're registering domain name, do a little bit of research, know who you are dealing with, understand their terms of service and customer service available. Can you reach them, the registrar, if you need help? Understand the small print of the registration agreement that you are signing into. This will help avoid problems down the road. Domain names are extremely valuable assets. I mean, the range of what you might pay to register a domain name can vary greatly, from a few dollars to thousands of dollars, depending on what kind of business you have, what kind of brand you are maintaining. But no matter what you pay, they are valuable assets because they represent and they give you an online presence, which is invaluable. Know who your registrar is, and this might seem intuitive, but oftentimes we hear about folks registering domain names, and then a year later they forget who they registered through. They cannot contact them. They're not giving them updated information, and then all of a sudden, your information, your blog, your small business website is down. And you know, so you always want to be proactive when you have a domain name and get out in front of these sorts of problems. A little bit about the Registrant program. We offer educational materials, and we do outreach and engagement like this at ICANN meetings and at other fora to educate registrants about their rights and responsibilities, as I've talked about today, and the policies that impact them, and try and give them best practices for registering and maintaining and renewing their domain names. Of course, I'm looking forward to hearing from the other panelists and to take questions. Remember that ICANN is a participatory, multi-stakeholder body. Of course, a great partner of the IGF ecosystem, and we always welcome new participants and previous participants to engage at ICANN through public comments and to represent domain name holders or whoever you are in the ecosystem. That is it. I can take questions, or we can move on to the other panelists.
Barak seems to have lost audio from our end. Barak, do you want to unmute yourself and try to speak?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, proceed.
Can you hear me? All right. Thank you very much, Bob, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, from wherever you're joining from. It's evening in Nairobi, but I'm happy, thanks to the internet, to be able to give an intervention into this, what I would consider an end user conversation. So kindly flag me in case I drop off, or you can't hear me clearly, but I will try to make sure that I make my interventions as short as possible. So my name is Barak Otieno, the General Manager of Africa Top Level Domains Organization, the regional association that brings together a country called Top Level Domain Registries on the African continent. Now, I don't want to assume that we are all subject matter experts. I'm sure there are those who are listening into the domain conversation for the first time, and they are familiar faces that are used to this conversation. So obviously, a domain name is one of the critical internet resources, if I may use that term. Of course, we all know that there are numbers and there are names. Most of us are familiar with numbers because we use them on our telephone. In fact, in Kenya, a term has been coined which says that numbers don't lie. So we use numbers for money, we use numbers on our phones, but also on the other hand, we have domain names which translate numbers, which normally we don't remember offhand, into information that we can easily relate to. So for example, for me to be able to connect in this session, I had to visit the Africa IGF website, afigf.africa, to get more information relating to this session. And of course, the elders say information is power. So the domain name, from a naming and numbering perspective, is a very critical system globally and even for us as Africans. So to bring the point home, the way the domain name system is managed globally, of course, is on a regional basis. And Africa Top Level Domains Organization brings together the country called Top Level Domain Registries in Africa. These are basically the institutions or organizations that manage the unique identifiers for our nation. So for the case of Malawi, it's .mw. For the sake of Kenya, it's .ke. For the sake of South Africa, it's .za. These are public interest resources that are managed for the benefit of the interest of course, internet in the local communities. I am going this far because I want to bring out the importance of the registrant at the end of the day. So of course, we have the identifier. Let me take .mw for Malawi in this instance. And then we have the registry, of course, the .mw registry that in most cases is run by a public interest institution, or that takes into consideration the local internet community or the local internet landscape. You find in most countries a multi-stakeholder body that is charged with the responsibility of managing the domain name system. And then you have registrars. These are business entities that are charged with the responsibility of availing these critical internet resources to the common man or the end user, whom in this case we will refer to as the registrant. Now, the registrant is a critical person because they rely on this system for information, for education, and in some cases for entertainment. And I must say that in this day and age, when we are talking about digital economies, we survive on account of the information that we are able to receive. We're just coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. those who protected themselves on account of the information they were able to receive about the way the pandemic, the virus was mutating, and ways in which they could protect themselves from the virus. Meaning that access to this information was a life-saving factor in many countries. Those who survived are those who were able to access the right information and take advantage of that particular information. And it is normally registrants who are using these domain name systems or these domain extensions for information that, for lack of a better word, allows them to survive, either economically or in other ways that the information that they are seeking is relevant to them. And so I think it is crucial to ensure that registrant information, which in data security parlance is referred to as personally identifiable information, is taken care of. There are many ways to look at this. One of them is, first of all, to notify the registrant the value of their information. And from an AFTLD perspective, one of the things that we have been doing, of course, in partnership with ICANN, working very closely with Bob and other colleagues from ICANN, is in Africa, many programs such as the Africa Domain Name System Program or the Africa Domain Name System Forum, in which we gather local stakeholders from government, private sector, civil society, academia, end user organizations, so that they can discuss how the domain name system is affecting them on a local basis, on a regional basis, and on an international basis. In fact, we started the Africa Domain Name System Forum 10 years ago, but right now the focus is on localizing the forum so that we can involve local stakeholders or local voices in the domain name conversation so that they are able to understand their roles and responsibilities. And in my humble opinion, I believe that the value of the internet is local. Whereas most of us cherish global information that we receive, but from an impact perspective, it matters what we do with the information that we receive at a local level, meaning that the end user has to be empowered. The registrant has to be empowered. They have to know what are their rights in the first place. For instance, if I own a domain name, what are my rights insofar as this domain name is concerned? Of course, there's the question of how you acquire it, and there's the question of how you retain it. There's also the question of how you protect it. These are the issues that we need to continuously articulate to end users. Of course, from a technical community perspective, we have worked hard to make sure that we have secure, stable, and reliable systems, but this is not enough. Now we have to look at the end user side and ensure that they are able to use these systems in the right way to the benefit, to their own benefit and to the benefit of the local community. The other perspective that I would bring out is increasingly we are starting to see human rights implications around the issue of domain names, especially insofar as registration of names is concerned. Of course, when the domain name conversation started, there was the whole issue of how names are registered. They are registered on a first come, first served basis. But now we are seeing a lot of legal issues coming around. Okay, someone took my name, so what do I do about this? Again, takes us back to the point that we need more conversations at community level around if, for instance, someone knows very well, you know, there are those family businesses in our community. Let's say Barak and Sons, we have been operating a business for 30 years, and someone all of a sudden comes and registers barakandsons.co.ke or barakandsons.mw. How do we handle such an issue? Of course, the registries have come up with alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, or the tech community has come up with that, but does the community understand the value of such processes? Of course, we who have been in the tech system for a while have worked so hard to develop such systems. Some of you who are part of ICANN policy development processes know how long it takes to develop some of these policies. But it is high time that we bring these policies to community level. And that's why for us at AFTLD, working together with ICANN and the African Registrar Association, we are advocating and pushing for localized national domain name system forums so that we can have these conversations at local level, because we believe that it will make a very big difference in local communities. As I conclude my first round of comments, I would say that we have to deliberately and intentionally see how to bring registrants into the domain name conversation, even if this means embedding the domain name conversation as part of national education curricula, for lack of a better word, because right now there is no country that does not appreciate the value of the internet or does not appreciate the value of the domain name system. We are introducing children to tablets. Most of our schools, we are introducing children to ICTs. We've seen the Partner to Connect program from ITU and many other initiatives. And I think it is also time for us to introduce this domain name conversation at the earliest levels of education so that end users are able to understand and know their rights and responsibilities from a very tender and a very early age. This has to be part and parcel of our community conversation or our community fabric, I submit. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you very much, Barak. I think that was quite comprehensive and really, really incisive. And I want to believe that you broke this down in the most understandable manner. So thank you for that intervention. So now I want to move to, so that was a CCTLs or a country code names ecosystem perspective. So to give us a registrar's perspective is Lakima Silela from Africa Registry or Central Registry, who will speak to us from a registrar's perspective, how they approach rights of registrants, and hopefully that then completes that cycle of ICANN, CCTLs, and registrars, and then we can then have a Q&A from the floor. So over to you, and most welcome, Lucky.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, good evening to our colleagues in the House, colleagues across the continent, and in the diaspora who are joining us today. I think when we look at the registrant's rights and responsibilities, one can first, confirm the fact that the triple R model is very essential. It's important for the simple reason that it is a segmentation of the functions and the expectations and the deliverables by each entity that owns that R. Owning that R, the domain name space, registrar, being a regulator, being a registrar, puts a lot of expectation and requirements on each individual and on the entire ecosystem. So it is almost a situation where once you have your rights, you need to understand the limitations of your rights. It's almost something that your politicians will say is tantamount to democracy. How much democracy and your democracy that you have must not infringe on the rights of others. It must also ensure that it protects the rights of others. It must not only be self-serving. So in this instance, we talk to the rights of the registrant. We are almost looking at policies at an operational level. We're looking at those acts. How do we operationalize policies that we normally have at a very high level? We are now looking at them on a day-to-day basis. How is that end user protected? how is the end user impacted. We are now looking at the best practices in addressing the end user. We are also looking at areas of support. What kind of support mechanisms are in place that are provided for the registrant or the end user? We are looking at your simple things, your KYC, called know your client. You need to know your client. Who is your service provider? And then finally, how the entities are protected. At the top, what I'm citing or talking to is that there will always be a registrar agreement. And we expect that each entity, okay, we I guess getting some feedback. Apologies on that. Let's see if we can handle that. Okay. So we anticipate that there will always be a registrant agreement or a registrar agreement. This covers at the higher level of the service offering. And each registrant is required to have knowledge and have sight of that registrar agreement. There are different levels of service offerings. The registrant, by the nature of the business, will be interacting with the registrar, and in turn, the registrar interacts with the registry. So all these functions, all these entities in the ecosystem need to have a sight or need to have an understanding of what agreements are in place. So this is the first thing that your registrant must have, sight of the registrar agreement. Similar to know your client issues, that we expect that the know your client is that the registrant must know who they are signing up with. They need to have an understanding of their service provider, the registrar. They do not have to go blindly to accepting a service or accepting signing onto an expected offering that is not going to be delivered. So this is one of the critical areas where you want to make sure that you are being provisioned a service by an accredited registrar. So it's self-protection to ensure that your data is also protected. That is the essence of the KYC approach and knowing your client. Equally, when we look at the registrant needs to enter into an arrangement where they understand the terms and conditions. We do not expect registrants to sign up into an arrangement where only one party has sight of the agreement and only the service provider has sight of those terms. So this has to be transparent, because the registrar by nature is the channel partner, is the entity that provides a service to the registrant. The registry would not have sight of that. So it is incumbent upon the registrar to ensure that they understand what they are signing up for or signing up to. The next thing that we need to ensure that our registrants are aware of is that entity sufficiently capacitated to provide support services? Will they be able, when I need help, be there to provide that service? So in the registrar agreement, all those factors are covered. They are already considered. However, we need to ensure that at the registrant level, equally those areas of support, and to be able to find support 24/7, it's in place. Who is information? Accurate information. Now, this is one of the very dicey, contentious area. That's a directory services. This is where your information resides with the registry. However, it is who posts that information on the registry. We have seen registrars using their own credentials in registering your name and not using your credentials to have your name created. This has resulted in, if the registrar shuts down or disappears, you have no recourse to your name. Your name is almost lost, is in limbo. So to protect yourself, you need to ensure that on the who is or in the directory service, your name is the one that's appearing as a registrant, not the name of the registrar. And those are some of the things that we've been seeing where we had to impose some server hold or deletion, actions to ensure that the name can be restored back to the entity that they have lost the name to. So registrant warranties, these are some of the things that we need to be looking at or that we provision, One, ensuring the rights are clear and understood by the registrant. Two, to also look at ensuring that you do not infringe third-party legal rights, the things that I was talking to in the opening, and understanding that that domain name that you acquire will not be used for unlawful purposes, and also that you must have at least 2 operational name servers for your name to resolve. And you must not be influenced by the registry and or the registrar to acquire that name. You must acquire that name independently. Now, and on the flip side of this is mechanisms that address name disputes. Name disputes, Barak spoke to earlier on, and name disputes are associated with suddenly your name is lost to you, or your name is used by somebody else that is not supposed to be there, or somebody changes the credentials on your namespace, or the registrar disappears and you cannot update your records because the registrar has used their own credentials on your name. So we have a complaints form where you would complete the complaints form stating the nature of the complaint, and we as a registry would then respond according to what you would have been seeking, the recourse that you are seeking on your complaints form. The other type of infringement is intellectual law infringement. Mostly this kind of infringement is taken to the courts. There is very little that we do when there is issues of property law. We rely on the courts. However, that could be a costly exercise. The best route that we still believe works is an alternate dispute resolution process. So partly of this, we are responsible for ensuring that ADR, or this alternate dispute resolution process, is in place and is also known to the general public. It is more affordable. We ensure that. Then there is this unlawful transfer that I spoke to, which we believe can be dealt with by instituting registry lock. Registry lock is a technique that you are the only entity that would access your name and to change whatever credentials through a 2-factor authentication system. So when you enter your portal to change your credentials, a message will be sent to your dedicated number, and you would confirm that it is you on that dedicated number. Then you'll be able to do the authentication or the changes onto your domain name. And today we have this manual authentication, the registry lock. However, we're looking at introducing an automated registry lock, whereby we believe it's not going to be this 2-factor authentication. They're looking at other things, our research team with regards to this. Then we also have what we call a Form 2 process, And this is manually updating your details. Now, this is when everything would have been, your name has been taken over, the person who has taken over your name is not available. We then institute what we call a Form 2 process, where you fill it manually, you get it validated by Commissioner of Oaths, and with that, we are able to restore your name back to you, registrant. And parallel to that, we also have a server hold process where we put the name on server hold until everything has been corrected and associated, or the corrective measures are put in place. These measures are what we believe are very helpful in ensuring that the rights of a registrant are protected and those warranties guaranteed. And on that note, these are some of the things we're dealing with. We have, I must say, a lot of examples that we can cite that we believe registrants need to be aware of, and they must forever ensure that their names are protected and ensure that their names are not lost to illegal entities out there or illegal actors. I thank you, Chair, on that one.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. I think quite comprehensive, and maybe if we have questions, I think we could put them through to our speakers now. And I see one. So as I start that off, I see our time is also rushing. So if we can have very direct questions, and I would ask my panelists also to be equally pointed in addressing them. Together with the second question that would come after me, I wanted to pose a question to Barak and Lucky in terms of how has been your experience from a registrar perspective and also from CCTLDs in really holistically addressing, say, disputes, cases of a successfully addressed dispute around registrant rights or domain names. Probably if you could just give us an idea of that, how long it takes, what avenues, and if our registrars really know these avenues. So I'd ask, we'll take the second question, and then Barak, Lucky, and maybe Brian, if you have comments, you could react to that.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me, please? Am I audible? Okay, great. So good afternoon. My name is Toba Obani. I'm the Vice President of Nigeria Internet Registration Association. That is the entity in charge of the .ngccTLD. I am also the CEO of WUGOST. WUGOST is an ICANN accredited registrar, NERA accredited registrar, KENIC accredited registrar. So I sit in that registrar angle. And so this is a question, something that we've seen happen in Nigeria. So we talk about registrants protection and rights, but then we also know that there are some registrants that are deliberately bad actors and fraudulent. The current internet domain, registering a domain name, you just enter any detail. I can claim to be Lucky, for example, and I register a domain name. I could even use this email, because the way the global process of registering domain is just put anything there, right? And we have people that have done that in the past, and then they register domains pretending to be other entities, defraud people. And in the case of Nigeria's scenario, we've seen cases where the law enforcement cannot find the registrant, and therefore they default to the registrar. And then they ask questions that, why don't you do a KYC? I'm also a part of the Registrant Accuracy Scoping Group, GNSO of ICANN, where we're exploring this whole concept of how do we ensure that registrant details are as accurate as possible. And that concept is being considered. So this is my question, really. what do we think is a reasonable way in today's world, understanding that basically anyone can claim to be anyone, and we know that the internet and domain system is critical and can also be abused very easily. During COVID, one of the things that was happening, people were registering variants of COVID to spread fake news, in some cases to defraud people, telling them that you should pay for vaccine because people were really afraid and looking for anything that could save them. So there are a lot of things happen like that. And when you check the ways, the person could be claimed to be Barack Obama for anybody's case. I mean, it's so easy to claim to be anybody. So what are reasonable steps that we think, and this goes to any of the panelists, that we can take in today's global economy to see how we can identify registrants? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think we can start with those. Barak, I see your hand is up, so you could go first.
Yes, thank you very much, Bob. And let me start by also recognizing Dr. Paulos Nirenda from .mwcctld, and of course, Tijani Benjama from Afralo. And I don't know, I'm trying to see those that I can be able to recognize on the screen. I'm sure they can also weigh into this conversation. To answer the question quickly, I'll start with the question that has just been asked by Mr. Obani. Forgive me if I mentioned the name wrongly. My humble opinion would be we need to look at addressing domain name related issues from a bottom-up perspective. And when I say a bottom-up perspective is including all relevant stakeholders in processes that are aimed at addressing potential problems or issues that are affecting the domain name system. I say this mindful of the history or the journey of the internet and the domain name system. We know that the internet started from a research perspective. Of course, the whole story of ARPANET, and it eventually was supported, of course, again by government through the military authorities. And then at some point, it was brought to a multi-stakeholder environment when ICANN was created. And that is what has driven it to where it is so far. So I think at local level, I would say that most of the sticky issues, like the one Mr. Obani has raised, would easily be addressed when we have mechanisms that bring all stakeholders on the table. Because when you look at, for example, injustices that happen in the community, because when we are talking about rights and responsibilities, we are indirectly talking about injustices. Injustices happen because of the information that one party has that another party does not. In the UN parlance, it's called the haves and have-nots. And you find that those who have information live a better life. Those who have information are not prone to diseases. Those who have information have more money than those who do not have information. But conversely, those who do not have information, then, you know, like we look at our families in the traditional African communities, the concept of the breadwinner. If you are the only one who has money, it means that you have to take care of all the problems in the community. So it is in our interest that we build the capacity or we develop the capacity of our family members so that every person can take care of himself to the extent possible. Of course, this is debatable. So I must say that there are practices like squatting, cyber squatting, which, I mean, are well known. You may find that there's someone who doesn't care about registering their domain names, and someone else will quietly register them for a song until such a time that this person who needs this name, thanks to maybe pandemics like COVID, will then realize that, hey, I need my name to take my business online, and now my name is no longer available. I need to pay for it. So whether the person who packed that name or who was quoting on that name did it illegally is a question of how the local community understands things that are illegal and those that are not. And this brings me back to the conversation that you raised, Bob. Of course, quite a number of African CCTLDs have put in place dispute resolution mechanisms. We have been encouraging African CCTLDs to ensure that dispute resolution mechanisms are in place through some of the courses that we have been offering over the last 10 years. If I may just mention them, we have the initial registry operators course, the advanced registry operators course, and the secure registry operators course. Programs that have been developed jointly or in partnership with the ICANN, with the Internet Society, with the network, with the NSRC, among many other partners. And we have even gone further at FTLD, working very closely with Dr. Paulos Nirenda, who is in the room there, to try and look at some of the realities that are affecting the registries and tweak these courses to address these particular realities. And what we are seeing is that a number of registries now have, I don't want to use the term kangaroo courts, but they have a court-like structure where they are able to adjudicate disputes that arise from people who maliciously take over names of their competitors, for lack of a better word. Of course, some of these cases end up in court, but in many places where there is advanced jurisprudence, and I know that African courts are finding ways of collaborating or working together based on what I have been reading. You find that most of the judges would rather encourage those who have disputes to address them out of court before coming to court, because court processes are very expensive. And these are some of the conversations that we are encouraging in the national domain name system forums, where there are no dispute resolution mechanisms, we want the registries to ensure that they have this in place. And even where they are in place, there has to be a deliberate and intentional effort to inform the public that in case there are disputes like this, take advantage of them. Register your domain name so that someone else does not register it. Because if someone else registers it, this is the challenge that you are going to face in the near future. It's more or less like the democracy process that most of our countries have been going through. And you find that, Africa, we are coming from a kingdom environment or a monarch mindset, for lack of a better word, transitioning into democracy, which is really not our key thing. And therefore, there's a lot of capacity building and capacity development that all stakeholders have to continuously do. But to answer your question, Bob, I would say that yes, increasingly, African CCTLDs have put in place dispute resolution mechanisms. They have legal experts either hired at the registry level or at the board level for the registry. And they are also organizing and supporting local events where these conversations are being encouraged. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barak. I am sure we all understood your kangaroo court. I hope you did not lose anyone along the way. Brian, I see your hand. If you could do that in 2 minutes, like Barak did it in 1 minute. And yeah, Brian, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and hello again, everybody. Thanks for the comments from my fellow panelists, and I just wanted to react again and try and take 30 seconds. Barak, from your initial remarks, I wanted to just reiterate and agree that the importance of education to domain name holders and capacity building even at the youngest levels of schooling, I think is a great idea and something we need to do more of as more and more of us are coming up online and creating online presences. Lucky, thank you for all of your remarks, but specifically some of the important points you raised about protections that are in place already for domain name holders to protect them online for security purposes, to protect them against bad actors who might be trying to hijack domain names, unauthorized transfers. We understand these are problems, and there's things in place to mitigate them, but it takes, sort of proactive measures at the registry and registrar levels. You also mentioned the importance for registrants to understand the terms and conditions of their registration agreements. Very much agree with that. So just thanking you for those comments. And Toba, very good points. Thank you for your comments and your participation within ICANN. And when it comes to sort of fraudulent domain name registrations, this is certainly a problem. And I would agree with what I think Barak mentioned, that we hope that the community that is there involved in the IGF and across the world will come under the the ICANN umbrella and work together using the multi-stakeholder model to try and address in different ways the folks that are fraudulently registering domain names and using them unfortunately for malicious purposes. I hope together as an entire community we can keep addressing that to mitigate it best we can. So that's it for now, and I look forward to other comments.
Thank you very much, Barak. So, and Brian, for that. Ultimately, I have two Bs online, so they come in interchangeably. So I bring it back to Lucky to also just give us his response. Then I see Dr. Nyirenda. I'm sure he'll be speaking as an elder to sort of summarize the session after Lucky. So yes, Lucky.
Dr. Nyirenda, yes, it's always nice to have you around. Look, one of the things that we're dealing with is unintended consequences of digitization. We were excited that we are now living in this era of internet, and everything is working at the speed of light, not only the speed of sound, but now as people uptake, where this digital economy, the digital age, we then have to better regulate it. Suddenly we must come up with better regulations. On the issue of the ADR, this alternate dispute resolution, the best mechanisms today is to have dedicated teams that are looking at these matters. And you need at least 3 to 4 teams that are independent of each other, that can be appointed on a rotational basis. You do not want to have a single team that will deal with all the ADR issues. So that on its own has proven to be very successful. You need, as a registry, as the community, the multi-stakeholder group, to be very close to this process. You don't want to let it run on its own. So the timing of this process is very essential, because there is a registrant who is deprived of a name. We try as much as possible to make sure that this process is not prolonged for an extended period, more than 30 days. We would like to see this process even dealt with much shorter, In certain instances, we invoke what we call a Form 6. A Form 6 is a process where we reverse an unlawful transfer of action, and we do this within 30 days. So ideally, using the best practice, the best mechanisms that we have, we think that the 30 days is the best. The worst case, borderline, would be your 60 days period. And then the other thing that is very tricky is that a lot of the processes for registering names are automated. You only see the intent, the bad actions at the end when the name is already registered. You cannot monitor at the point when the name is registered. So we are always almost going to be reactive. The name is already sitting in the registry, it has been created. It's now translating to other things. We need a mechanism to monitor. First, we build in more filters, monitor names as they are registered, and have an entity that will be responsible to test a name. We don't want to delay a name and put it in some holding space before it is released, but it might necessitate that before a name is released, especially when it has falling into a certain category, which is red, or if it's green, it's a clean name, it goes through. But if it's yellow or red, then it is parked. It is assessed and evaluated, the intentions, who is the applicant or the registrant, etc. And I believe this is one way that we can be using, we're improving our monitoring tools for both spam and all these other activities. It is a collaborative exercise. It's almost changing the landscape, the way we were doing things. The way we know things today must change. In the past, your registry would not look at the content. They would just look at the address. There would be a STEM person making sure the content is moving, not what is the content. Probably we have to stand up as registries and look at the content and stop that content at that point before it gets to the child, before we are dealing with issues of child abuse, pornography, etc. So it's a changing landscape. And Chair, thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Elder. Indeed, time would be our only constraint. So I would like to invite Dr. Nyirenda and then Tijani, and then after that, I'll ask Pierre to give us closing remarks. So Dr. Paulos, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot has been said. I want to concentrate at the country level and at the Africa regional level. And with respect to rights of registrants, I think because we live in a global world, especially for domain names, where there is really no restriction where the registrant may come from, depending on the policy of the registry. We find, particularly for Malawi, where I operate the .mw country code, we find that with respect to rights of registrants, there is often a conflict in addressing the issue of educating or informing or capacity building for registrants, where you have to balance the rights according to the capacity of the registrants. So if a registrant is coming from Europe or the United States, their expectations are different from those that we service from Malawi or from within Africa. Our registry doesn't have a lot of restrictions on who can register domains. So, for example, when GDPR came up, we had to balance between educating our registrants with respect to what they see in the WHOIS versus those that are coming from Europe who want this to be as brief as possible. While to educate a local registrant in Malawi, you need to provide as much information as possible. So I think one of the things that registries in countries like in Africa do struggle with is this balance of capacity building for registrants, where you have to deal with a very wide spectrum of registrants because we are an open registry. And so for us, we choose to ignore, we choose to provide more information for the Malawian registrant compared to the brief information that a European registry or registrant is looking for. So I thought I would just comment on this, that as a region, as Africa, or as a country, as Malawi, we need to make sure that we maintain this balance properly in terms of capacity building for our registrants, what rights they have, and what privileges they have with respect to their registrars and the registry, as compared to those coming from the other continents. Thank you very much.
And that's a wonderful intervention. Balancing act. How do you do that? And that is coming from a registry operator. So thank you for that intervention. And last but not least is Tijani.
Thank you very much. I think that all the rights of the registrants vis-a-vis his or her registrar or the registry of the string are all, I think, protected by the contract with ICANN, since any registrar has an accreditation agreement with ICANN, and any registry have an agreement with ICANN. But the problem is also that till 2018, all data you give to your reseller or your registrar are in a huge database called WHOIS, and this WHOIS was open, completely open to everyone. This is a big breach of personal data protection. In ICANN, we worked on this issue since 2018, and we are still working on it. A very big progress was done, but we still have other issues to address. Now, at least, if you want to see the data of any registrant, you are not able to do that. There is only very few data which are not classified as personal data. So I think this is one of the big threats for the registrant rights. Thank you.
So privacy laws and anonymization of personally identifiable information and its impact thereof on WHOIS information. So thank you to Tijani for that intervention. And now, in the interest of time, allow me to invite Pierre to sort of give closing remarks for this session. So Pierre, if you can hear us, over to you, please.
Hello, Bob, and all. Yes, I can hear you. Hope you can hear me as well. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. And this is Pierre D'Angino. And yes, thank you very much for this session, because I've been lurking there and I've been really hearing quite interesting things. Let me just, as kind of GSC Africa and as ICANN, say that I see this as a good sort of initiative. Of course, I was suggesting that we will have, I was thinking that we'll have much more interventions, but I understand we are also caught up into, time constraint at some point here. But nevertheless, I've seen so many interesting, information passing over, and that's exactly why we staged this session, actually. So I would really like to, I'm not going to comment on the importance of what has been discussed so far. We are talking about personal data protection. We are talking about so many tools that we all now have to sort of resolve the disputes. We are also having issues about, the commercial aspect, the whole thing. We didn't touch much on issues such as, DGPR, but all of these are quite important, topics to really deal with these days. Thank again, especially for our presenters, Lucky, Masila, Brian. I think your experience show here for the details that you provided, especially on the services, but also on the way one might now protect, the consumer or the registrant, I would say. So I think all of this is quite, important to us. I like this idea of balancing act again also. And of course, Professor Nyanda is always around to kind of provide these quite interesting sort of things. But all this boils down to one or two things for us in Africa, at least to, of course, ICANN will be supporting the way it has to support in terms of capacity building and others. But as usual in Africa, be it difficult or not, we also need to pay attention to the rights of the registrant as well. So yeah, let me stop here and really thank you all, and also for putting this session together. So back to you, my good friends. Bye for now.
So thank you very much. I think after that, we basically bring the session to a close, and really thank you, participants, for weathering the audio challenges, technical challenges. We call it, I am losing the name, but whenever we are using technology, this is always part and parcel. So thank you, and really hope that you still manage to follow. With that, conclude and adjourn the session. So thank you very much.